Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments what time you are currently listening to this, and where you're listening from. Now, let's get right into the story. At 9:47 p.m. on November 14, 2018, a 28-year-old archivist walked into a private London vault to examine documents that supposedly didn't exist. Security cameras captured her entering, but no camera, not a single one, ever recorded her leaving. Her coat was found draped over a chair. Her satchel was gone, and the man who invited her to that meeting has refused to speak ever since. This is the vanishing of Eleanor Vance. Eleanor Vance was not the kind of person who disappeared. She was methodical, precise, the kind of woman who color-coded her research notes and arrived 10 minutes early to everything. At 28, she worked as an archivist at the Royal Historical Society in Bloomsbury, a quiet, prestigious role that suited her perfectly. Her colleagues described her as brilliant but understated, someone more comfortable with 18th century manuscripts than small talk. She had a small circle of close friends, a modest flat in Bloomsbury, and a deep, almost obsessive dedication to her work. Her older sister, Priya Sharma, was her closest confidant. The two spoke nearly every day, a habit formed in childhood and never broken. Priya, who ran a small bakery in Yorkshire, described Eleanor as cautious and private, not the kind of person who took risks or acted impulsively, which is why what happened on the night of November 14th made no sense at all. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, Eleanor had become unusually secret. She worked later than normal. She canceled plans with friends. When Priya pressed her about it during their evening phone calls, Eleanor would deflect, just busy with a project, but there was something in her voice that Priya couldn't place. Attention, an edge. Then, 3 days before she vanished, Eleanor said something that Priya would replay in her mind thousands of times in the years that followed. I think I found something significant, something that's been buried for a very long time. She wouldn't say more, and Priya, trusting her sister's judgment, didn't push. She wishes she had. On the evening of November 14th, Eleanor left her flat carrying her worn leather satchel, the one she took everywhere, and dressed in her usual navy wool coat. She told no one where she was going except for a single cryptic entry in her notepad, discovered later by police. RV, the Nightingale Archive, 9 p.m. No one at the Royal Historical Society had ever heard of the Nightingale Archive, and the initials RV matched no known contact in Eleanor's phone, email, or professional correspondence. CCTV footage tracked Eleanor through the streets of Bloomsbury and into the city of London. At precisely 9:47 p.m., she was captured on camera entering Sterling House, an imposing, privately owned building that served as a members-only repository of rare manuscripts and historical artifacts. She walked through the front entrance, past the reception desk, and into the building. That was the last time any camera recorded Eleanor Vance alive. Sterling House's internal security system showed no footage of her leaving. The building's rear exits were monitored. Nothing. The windows were sealed. The only person who claimed to have seen her after that point was the building's owner, a reclusive collector named Silas Croft. Croft told police that Eleanor arrived on schedule. They discussed a collection of late 19th century documents for approximately 1 hour, and she left through the front door at around 11 p.m. But the cameras say otherwise. And the security guard on duty that night, a man named Arthur Jenkins, offered only a single vague statement. She seemed fine when she left. He could not describe what direction she walked. He could not say whether she was alone. And when pressed further, he retained a solicitor and declined all subsequent interviews. Eleanor Vance walked into Sterling House at 9:47 p.m. According to every piece of electronic evidence available, she never walked out. Priya Sharma reported Eleanor missing the following morning, after her calls went unanswered through the night. By the time police arrived at Eleanor's Bloomsbury flat, the scene told a familiar, chilling story. No signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle, nothing disturbed. Just an empty apartment and a faint smell of lavender and old paper. The case was assigned to Detective Inspector Anya Sharma, no relation to Priya, a veteran investigator with nearly 2 decades on the force. D.I. Sharma recognized the hallmarks of a case that would be difficult from the start. No body, no motive, no witnesses, no forensic evidence. Just a woman who walked into a building and didn't come out. The initial investigation moved quickly, but hit walls at every turn. Eleanor's phone went dead at 10:02 p.m., 15 minutes after she entered Sterling House. No calls, no texts, no location data after that point. Her bank accounts showed no activity. Her passport was still in her flat. D.I. Sharma focused on Sterling House. She obtained a warrant and swept the building. Forensics found nothing. No blood, no fibers, no DNA evidence that couldn't be accounted for. The building was clean. Too clean, some on the team thought, for a structure that old. And then there was Silas Croft. Croft was a man of considerable wealth and deeply private habits. He had acquired Sterling House in the early 2000s and converted it into a personal archive. Very few people had ever been granted access. When D.I. Sharma requested a formal interview, Croft's solicitor responded with a medical exemption. His client was unwell and unable to speak with investigators. Weeks passed. The exemption was renewed, then renewed again. By the time D.I. Sharma obtained a court order compelling Croft's testimony, 3 months had elapsed. When he finally appeared, Croft offered nothing new. He described the meeting as routine, Eleanor as professional and composed, and claimed he had no knowledge of her movements after she left. His tone was measured. His answers were rehearsed, and his solicitor shut down every line of questioning that ventured beyond the narrow scope of that single evening. D.I. Sharma left the interview with a single conviction. Silas Croft was lying, but she couldn't prove it. Meanwhile, Priya Sharma was conducting her own investigation. She had moved from Yorkshire to London, renting a small flat near Eleanor's building. She visited the police weekly. She wrote to journalists. She contacted missing persons advocacy groups. Her flat became an archive of its own. Case files, newspaper clippings, printed emails, hand-drawn timelines covering every wall. She carried a framed photograph of Eleanor everywhere she went. Her sister at 28, smiling, alive, frozen in a moment that now felt like it belonged to another world. She didn't just vanish. Priya told anyone who would listen. Someone made her vanish, and that someone is inside Sterling House. The cryptic notepad entry haunted the investigation. RV, the Nightingale Archive. D.I. Sharma's team spent weeks searching every historical database, institutional catalog, and archival registry in the UK. No collection called the Nightingale Archive existed in any official record. It wasn't affiliated with any university, museum, or government body. As far as the historical establishment was concerned, it didn't exist. The initials RV were equally opaque. They matched no known contact in Eleanor's life. No colleague, no friend, no family member. Then Priya found something the police had missed. While sorting through Eleanor's personal belongings, she discovered a notebook hidden inside the lining of a coat hanging in the back of Eleanor's wardrobe. It wasn't Eleanor's usual research journal. It was smaller, older, and filled with entries written in a kind of personal shorthand that only someone who knew Eleanor intimately could begin to decipher. Priya spent weeks translating it. What she found changed the shape of the investigation. The notebook contained references to a private collection of documents, letters, diaries, and financial records dating back to the Victorian era that Eleanor believed had been deliberately removed from public archives decades ago. She referred to this collection repeatedly as the Nightingale Archive, and she believed it was being held inside Sterling House. The entries grew more urgent in the final pages. Eleanor wrote of a contact, identified only as RV, who had offered to grant her access to the collection in exchange for her professional assessment. She described feeling uneasy about the arrangement, but unable to resist the historical significance of what she might find. The final entry, dated November 13th, one day before she vanished, read, "Meeting confirmed for tomorrow evening. RV insists on discretion. I don't know what I'm walking into, but if these documents are real, this changes everything." She never wrote another word. The notebook opened a new line of inquiry and a new suspect. Among Eleanor's shorthand entries was a name she returned to several times with visible frustration: Julian Croft. Julian Croft, no known relation to Silas Croft, a coincidence that investigators found deeply uncomfortable, was a fellow archivist at a rival institution. He was Eleanor's professional contemporary. Same age, same field, same ambition. But where Eleanor was methodical and reserved, Julian was aggressive and territorial. Colleagues described a simmering rivalry between them. Julian had publicly questioned Eleanor's research methods at a conference in 2017. He had attempted to block her access to a shared manuscript collection. And according to two separate sources, he had once told a colleague that Eleanor didn't deserve the opportunities handed to her. When D.I. Sharma interviewed Julian, he was cooperative, almost too cooperative. He expressed concern for Eleanor, praised her work, and provided a detailed alibi for the night of November 14th. He had been at a departmental dinner with 12 witnesses until midnight. The alibi checked out. Julian Croft was accounted for, but something nagged at D.I. Sharma. Julian's surname, Silas Croft's surname, two Crofts orbiting the same case with no apparent connection. She dug deeper. Property records, financial disclosures, corporate filings, and buried in the records of a dormant trust established in 1987, she found it. Julian Croft was Silas Croft's nephew. When confronted with this, Julian's demeanor changed entirely. He denied any involvement. He claimed the family connection was distant, that he barely knew his uncle. But he also immediately retained a solicitor, the same firm that represented Silas. D.I. Sharma requested a second interview. Julian declined. His solicitor cited harassment and threatened legal action. Two people named Croft. One owned the building Eleanor walked into and never left. The other was her professional rival. And both were now hiding behind the same law firm. Dr. Alastair Finch was not a detective. He was a criminologist and historian at University College London, the kind of academic who studied disappearances the way entomologists study insects, with detached, methodical fascination. But the Vance case drew him in further than any case before. What captivated Finch wasn't the disappearance itself, it was the documents. If Eleanor's notebook was accurate, the Nightingale Archive contained Victorian-era records that had been systematically erased from public collections. Financial ledgers, private correspondence, legal documents, all removed, all hidden, all concentrated in the hands of a single private collector. Finch began his own research. He cross-referenced Eleanor's shorthand notes with gaps in publicly accessible Victorian archives and found something remarkable. At least 14 documents that should have existed in the National Archives or the British Library were simply missing. No record of transfer, no record of sale, no record of destruction. They had been cataloged in the 19th century, referenced in academic papers through the mid-20th century, and then nothing. They had been erased from the historical record as thoroughly as Eleanor had been erased from the physical world. Finch published a paper outlining his findings. It drew immediate attention and immediate pushback. Sterling House's solicitors issued a cease and desist letter. Silas Croft, through his legal team, called the paper defamatory speculation. But they never denied the documents existed. The investigation into Eleanor Vance's disappearance officially stalled in early 2020. The Metropolitan Police cited insufficient evidence to pursue charges against any individual. The case was reclassified as cold. Silas Croft died in 2021 at the age of 79. His estate, including Sterling House, was transferred to a private trust. The building was sealed. No inventory of its contents was ever made public. Arthur Jenkins, the security guard who claimed to have seen Eleanor leave, died in 2022. He never amended his statement. Julian Croft resigned from his position at the rival institution in 2020 and relocated abroad. His current whereabouts are unknown. He has made no public statement about Eleanor Vance or his uncle's connection to the case. D.I. Anya Sharma transferred to a different division within the Metropolitan Police. Colleagues say she kept a copy of the Vance case file in her desk long after it was no longer her responsibility. She has never spoken publicly about the case, but is reported to have told a colleague. That's the one that keeps me up at night. Dr. Finch continued his research into the missing Victorian documents. In 2023, he identified 3 additional records that had vanished from public archives, all from the same period, all connected to the same network of private collectors. His work has drawn both academic acclaim and legal threats. He has never been granted access to Sterling House, and Priya Sharma is still looking. She is now in her late 60s. She still lives in London. She still carries Eleanor's photograph. She still visits the police. She still writes letters. The walls of her flat are still covered in timelines and clippings and unanswered questions. Every year on November 14th, she stands outside Sterling House and holds a small, silent vigil. Just her, the photograph, and the building that swallowed her sister whole. She has never accepted that the case is cold. She has never stopped believing the answer is inside those walls. They sealed the building, Priya has said, but they can't seal the truth forever. What was in the Nightingale archive that was worth killing for, or worth hiding a person to protect? Who was RV? And were they the one who lured Eleanor to Sterling House? Or were they trying to help her? Why did no camera capture Eleanor leaving a building with only monitored exits? Why did Silas Croft hide behind solicitors for years? And why did his nephew share the same legal team? And where is Eleanor Vance? Her coat is still in an evidence locker at Scotland Yard. Her notebook is in Priya's flat. Her final painting, a half-finished watercolor of the London skyline, still sits on a shelf in her Bloomsbury apartment, untouched. Somewhere in this city, in a sealed building, or a buried file, or the memory of someone who was there that night, the truth about November 14th, 2018 exists. It's waiting, the same way Eleanor's sister has been waiting for 7 years. The question is, will anyone ever open that door? What do you think happened inside Sterling House? Was Eleanor silenced because of what she found or what she was about to find? And who is RV? Drop your theories in the comments below. On the evening of November 14th, 2023, a 22-year-old art student walked out of her London flat and was never seen again. Her door was left open. Her coffee was still warm. And hidden inside her final painting was a clue that nobody noticed until it was too late. This is the disappearance of Amelia Vance. And 5 clues suggest someone close to her knows exactly what happened. Amelia Vance was the kind of person people remembered. A final-year art student at the University of Westminster, she was known for her vivid, emotional paintings of London street life, bold colors, raw honesty, and a style that made professors describe her as one of the most promising students in a generation. She lived in a small studio flat in Bloomsbury with her closest friend, Priya Sharma. The apartment doubled as her workspace, canvases stacked against every wall, the smell of turpentine permanently embedded in the furniture, sketches pinned across a corkboard like a map of her imagination. By November 2023, Amelia was weeks away from completing her final university project. A prestigious internship at the Tate Modern was within reach. Her professors were excited. Her friends were proud. Everything was falling into place. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. In the weeks before she vanished, Priya noticed a change. Amelia had become quieter, more withdrawn. She spent longer hours alone in her studio, sometimes staring out the window with what Priya described as an uncharacteristic blankness. She started locking the deadbolt, even when she was home, something she had never done before. When Priya asked if something was wrong, Amelia brushed it off. Just stressed about the project, she said. But her eyes told a different story. Tuesday, November 14th started like any other day. Amelia worked on her final painting in her studio. That evening, Priya poked her head in and suggested they grab dinner together. Amelia hesitated, glanced at her canvas, and said she'd catch up later. That was the last time Priya saw her. By the next morning, Amelia's bedroom was empty. Her keys sat on the kitchen table. Her phone was dead. No signal, no activity. Her leather satchel, the one she carried everywhere, was gone. But the flat showed no signs of forced entry. No signs of a struggle. Nothing was missing except Amelia herself. And on the easel, her final painting sat unfinished. A bustling London street scene, full of life and color. But at the bottom corner, barely visible, was a detail that didn't belong. A small, stylized raven with outstretched wings. Nobody thought much of it at the time. They should have. Priya reported Amelia missing on the evening of November 15th. By then, the trail was already cold. The case was assigned to Detective Inspector Alastair Finch, a 58-year-old veteran of the Metropolitan Police with 3 decades of experience and a reputation for never letting a case rest. But Finch carried something heavier than professional duty. 30 years earlier, his younger sister had vanished under circumstances that were never resolved. The case was never solved. The wound never closed. Every missing person file that crossed his desk reopened it. But this one cut deeper than most. Amelia Vance was the same age his sister had been. Finch started where every good detective starts, with the evidence. He pulled Amelia's phone records, her emails, her social media activity, her university login history. What he found was the profile of a young woman whose life was entirely consumed by her art. No enemies, no dates, no secret relationships, no reason to run. But 2 things caught his attention. First, in the final 2 weeks before her disappearance, Amelia had accessed her university studio after midnight on 7 separate occasions. Her usual pattern was to leave by 8 p.m. Something was keeping her there late, or someone. Second, a single digital sketch file saved to her cloud storage, dated November 12th, just 2 days before she vanished. It was an anatomical study, detailed and precise. But in the background, almost hidden, was a drawing of the same stylized raven from her painting. And beside it, written in Amelia's handwriting, were 2 words: the Rookery. While Finch chased the digital trail, he also chased a name that kept surfacing in every conversation: Julian Croft. Julian was a former art student at Westminster, mid-20s, brilliant by all accounts, but deeply troubled. His work was dark, visceral, and unsettling, the polar opposite of Amelia's vibrant style. Professors described him as intense and solitary. Students described him as someone you crossed the street to avoid. According to multiple witnesses, Julian had developed a fixation on Amelia's work, but not out of admiration. He seemed to resent her. He called her art superficial and populist. He dismissed her talent as easy applause. And yet, he couldn't stop watching her. Professor Eleanor Hayes, head of the Fine Arts Department, told Finch she had seen Julian standing in the corridor outside Amelia's studio on multiple occasions, just watching her paint through the window. When confronted, he would simply walk away without a word. But it went further than that. Priya revealed something she hadn't initially told police. In the months before she disappeared, Amelia had been receiving anonymous notes. Not threats exactly, but intense, possessive commentary on her artwork. She found them slipped under her studio door and once inside her satchel. The handwriting was meticulous, almost obsessive. Amelia had stuffed them into her sketchbooks, trying to ignore them. And then there was the watching. Amelia had told Priya that she'd seen someone standing across the street from their flat on at least 3 occasions. A tall figure in dark clothing, just standing there, staring up at her window. She never confirmed who it was, but Priya had no doubt. Finch tracked Julian Croft to a rundown flat in East London. When Julian opened the door, Finch noted a man who seemed to exist in the margins. Gaunt pale, dressed in dark layers, eyes that refused to settle on anything. Inside, the walls were covered with collages of newspaper clippings, found objects, and abstract drawings that pulsed with a restless, dark energy. The space was meticulously organized in a way that bordered on compulsive, as though every item had been placed with surgical precision. Finch asked Julian directly about Amelia. His reaction was immediate. A tightening of the jaw, a flash of something behind the eyes, then a careful, practiced blankness. "I barely knew her," Julian said. "We were just students at the same university." But when Finch pressed him about the intensity of his interest in Amelia's work, Julian's composure cracked. His voice dropped to a strained murmur. Her work was superficial, easy. Mine is depth. It means something. He clutched a sketchbook to his chest like a lifeline. Finch asked if he could see it. Julian refused. The interview yielded no confession and no hard evidence. But Finch left that flat with a feeling he had learned to trust over 30 years. The certainty that Julian Croft was hiding something. The question was what? Back at the precinct, Finch couldn't shake the raven. The symbol had appeared twice in Amelia's work. Once in her final painting, once in her last digital sketch, alongside the words "the Rookery." It was too deliberate to be coincidence. He tasked a junior officer with cross-referencing London landmarks associated with bird names. The list was long: Sparrow Lane, Kingfisher Way, Heron Quay. But one entry stopped Finch cold. The Rookery, a derelict warehouse district near the abandoned King George docks in East London. The area was notorious. A maze of crumbling industrial buildings, known for its transient population and a long history of illegal activity. It was the last place anyone would associate with a bright, ambitious art student. And yet, Amelia had painted its symbol into her final work. She had written its name in her private sketchbook. She had gone there, or planned to go there, in the days before she vanished. Why? Finch pulled satellite imagery of the site. Gray, decaying structures stretched across the waterfront like the skeleton of a forgotten city. Forensics was dispatched to conduct a sweep of the area. In a narrow alley between two abandoned warehouses, they recovered a single item, a paintbrush, its bristles still faintly stained with cerulean blue. It was the same shade Amelia used in nearly every painting. The discovery at the Rookery should have cracked the case open. Instead, it deepened the mystery. Forensic analysis confirmed the paintbrush belonged to a set purchased by Amelia 3 months earlier. But there were no fingerprints on it besides her own, no DNA from a second person, no further evidence in the surrounding area. It was as if someone had placed it there deliberately, a breadcrumb or a taunt. Finch brought Julian Croft in for a second interview. This time, in the sterile glow of the interview room at Paddington Green, Julian was different. More guarded, more still, his eyes, dark and hollowed, fixed on the table between them. When Finch mentioned a Rookery, Julian didn't flinch. He didn't react at all. And to a detective with 30 years of experience, that absence of reaction was the loudest sound in the room. "Have you ever been to the King George Docks area, Mr. Croft?" A pause. Then, no. Finch laid the photograph of the cerulean-stained paintbrush on the table. Julian's eyes flickered to it for a fraction of a second, then returned to the table. "I don't know anything about that," he said, but his hands, clenched beneath the table, were trembling. Despite the mounting circumstantial evidence, the Crown Prosecution Service determined there was insufficient grounds to charge Julian Croft. No direct forensic link. No witnesses placing him with Amelia on the night she disappeared. Nook and Fishchen. He was released. 2 weeks later, Julian Croft vacated his East London flat without notice. No forwarding address. His phone went dark. His university records were never collected. He simply vanished, just like Amelia. It has now been over 2 years since Amelia Vance disappeared. Her case remains officially open, but has yielded no new leads. The Rookery Warehouse District was partially demolished in early 2024 to make way for a commercial development. Whatever secrets those walls held are now buried under concrete and steel. Julian Croft has never been located. An Interpol notice was issued in mid-2024, but no confirmed sightings have been reported. Detective Inspector Finch retired from the Metropolitan Police 6 months after the investigation stalled. According to colleagues, he took his copies of the case files with him. He has not spoken publicly about the case, but those close to him say he has never stopped working it. Priya Sharma still lives in the Bloomsbury flat. She has kept Amelia's studio exactly as it was. The canvases against the wall, the paints on the shelf, the unfinished painting still on the easel. The raven in the corner of that painting still stares out from the canvas, wings outstretched, frozen in a moment between flight and fall. And somewhere in the sprawl of London, or beyond it, the truth about what happened to Amelia Vance on the night of November 14th, 2023 is waiting to be found. The question is, who's still looking? What do you think happened to Amelia Vance? Was Julian Croft the key? Or is there something deeper hidden in the Rookery that investigators never found? Drop your theories in the comments. On March 14th, 2019, Amelia Monroe stepped out of her apartment on Belmont Avenue and vanished completely. No phone signal, no bank activity, nobody, just an open door, a half-finished cup of coffee still warm on the counter, and a city full of questions nobody could answer. What happened to Amelia Monroe? And why, after 5 years, Is someone still fighting to keep the truth buried? Amelia Monroe was 29 years old, a graphic designer living alone in a modest apartment in the Riverside district. Neighbors described her as quiet but friendly, the kind of person who smiled in the hallway but kept her life private. On the evening of March 14th, Amelia left work at her usual time. Security footage from her office building captured her walking out at 6:12 p.m., her bag slung over one shoulder. She stopped at a corner grocery store 2 blocks from her apartment. The store's cameras showed her buying a carton of milk and a bag of apples at 6:34 p.m. And then nothing. No camera in the city captured her after that moment. It was as if Amelia Monroe walked out of that store and straight off the face of the earth. Her landlord discovered the open apartment door the next morning. Inside, everything appeared untouched. Her keys sat on the kitchen table. Her laptop was open, still logged into her email. The grocery bag was on the counter, the milk never put away. There were no signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle, and no sign of Amelia. Her sister, Diana, reported her missing that same afternoon. But by then, the trail had already gone cold. The case landed on the desk of Detective Alexander Kovalenko, a 15-year veteran known for 2 things: his sharp instincts and his refusal to let a case die. But this one was different. Kovalenko had lost his own sister years earlier under circumstances that were never fully explained. The Monroe case didn't just feel like another assignment. It felt personal. Colleagues later said they watched him change over the months that followed, arriving earlier, leaving later, pinning photographs and timelines across his office walls until they resembled the work of a man unraveling. Still, in those early days, Kovalenko followed the evidence methodically. He pulled Amelia's phone records and found something strange. In the 48 hours before her disappearance, Amelia had received 17 calls from an unlisted number. She answered none of them. He checked her email and found a draft, never sent, addressed to her sister Diana. It read, "I think someone has been watching me. I don't know how to explain it, but things have moved in my apartment. Small things. Things only I would notice." She never hit send, and she never told anyone else. The police investigation stalled within weeks. No suspects, no leads. The case was quietly shelved, reduced to a thin file in a cabinet of cold cases. But someone else was paying attention. Priya Patel was a young investigative journalist hungry for her breakthrough story. She had been covering local crime for 2 years, and when she stumbled across a brief mention of Amelia Monroe's case buried in a police blotter, something about it didn't sit right. Why had a young woman vanished without a trace in a neighborhood covered by security cameras? And nobody seemed to care. Priya started digging. She filed public records requests and discovered that police had collected security footage from 6 businesses near Amelia's apartment. But when she reviewed the case log, only 3 were listed as examined. 3 cameras worth of footage had simply never been reviewed. She reached out to Kovalenko, expecting resistance. Instead, the detective agreed to meet her at a diner on the outskirts of the city. What he told her that night changed the direction of the entire investigation. "There are people," Kovalenko said quietly, "who don't want this case solved." He wouldn't say more, but the look in his eyes told Priya everything she needed to know. This was bigger than a missing person. Priya turned her attention to the apartment building itself. She knocked on every door, interviewed every resident. Most offered nothing. Vague memories, polite shrugs. But one man refused to open his door at all. Javier Morales had lived in the apartment directly below Amelia's for over a decade. Quiet, kept to himself, paid rent in cash. Neighbors barely knew his name. When Priya finally tracked him down outside the building one evening, Morales was curt. "I don't know anything about that girl," he said, but his hands were shaking. Priya checked the public records. What she found raised more questions than answers. Javier Morales had no employment history on file, no social media presence, no digital footprint of any kind. For a man living in the middle of a major city, he was remarkably invisible. Then, 3 weeks into her investigation, Priya received an anonymous envelope at her office. Inside was a single photograph, a blurry image taken from a window showing Amelia Monroe standing in the parking lot behind her building on the night she vanished. She wasn't alone. A figure stood behind her, partially obscured by shadow. The timestamp read 9:47 p.m., over 3 hours after her last confirmed sighting. The photo had been taken from the angle of Javier Morales' apartment. Priya brought the photograph to Kovalenko. The detective's face went pale. He told her that the original investigation had never placed Amelia at the building past 7 p.m. This photo changed the entire timeline. Kovalenko reopened his personal investigation with a fury. He pulled Javier Morales' background through unofficial channels and discovered something that the original case file had missed entirely. Morales had a prior connection to the Riverside district dating back years, before he moved into the building. A connection that overlapped with another missing persons case from 2014. A woman named Lucia Fernandez. Same neighborhood, same profile, same silence from the authorities. Before Kovalenko could dig further, he was pulled off duty. The department cited personal involvement compromising objectivity. His files were confiscated. His access to the case was revoked. 2 days later, Javier Morales vacated his apartment in the middle of the night. No forwarding address. No trace. Priya Patel published her investigation in a 5-part series that drew national attention. The public demanded answers. Protests gathered outside the police precinct. Amelia Monroe's face appeared on billboards and social media campaigns. But the answers never came. Javier Morales was never located. The shadowed figure in the photograph was never identified. The 3 unreviewed security tapes were reported as damaged beyond recovery by the department. Kovalenko, stripped of his badge, continued investigating on his own. The last anyone heard from him, he had traveled to a small town 3 states away, following a lead he refused to share with anyone. Amelia Monroe's apartment has long since been rented to someone new. Her sister Diana still lights a candle in her window every March 14th. And somewhere in a file cabinet or a buried hard drive or the memory of a man who disappeared into the night, the truth about what happened to Amelia Monroe is waiting. The question is, does anyone still want to find it? What do you think happened to Amelia Monroe? Was Javier Morales the key to this mystery, or just another piece of a much larger puzzle? Drop your theories in the comments below. If you love these stories, subscribe and hit the bell, because some mysteries refuse to stay buried.